Welcome back, listeners. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today we're strapping in and taking a look at the Eurofighter Typhoon, a fighter jet that's making waves. We've got some really fascinating reports to dig into from Aerospace and even Eurofighter's own website.
It's going to be a fascinating look into what this jet is all about. It's more than just nuts and bolts, that's for sure.
Right. I mean, just thinking about its development with Airbus, BAE Systems, and Leonardo all involved, it's a real symbol of European collaboration in defense.
Yeah, and Aerospace really emphasizes that point, how the Eurofighter is not just a technological marvel, but a sign of European unity on the defense front.
Totally. So Aerospace lays out the Typhoon's development and its intended role, but what really caught my eye was the whole swing roll capability.
Yeah, the ability to transition seamlessly between air-to-air and ground attacks. That's huge in a dynamic battle space.
It's like 1 minute you're engaging enemy jets, the next you're taking out a ground target. That's got to be a wild ride for the pilot.
Aerospace really highlights how critical that flexibility is in modern warfare.
And you know, the Eurofighter website uses the phrase true swing roll combat aircraft and talks about how it can even update missile and bomb targeting while in the air. It's pretty mind-blowing.
No kidding. That kind of adaptability mid-flight, it's a massive strategic advantage. Talk about keeping the enemy guessing.
All right, so Aerospace doesn't hold back when describing the Typhoon's performance either. They mentioned its incredible speed and maneuverability.
Oh yeah, they talk about how it stacks up against other aircraft. It's really impressive.
And the Eurofighter website calls it a performance powerhouse. They even brag about how it outclasses competitors pretty regularly.
Well, they have the specs to back it up. The Eurofighter's thrust-to-weight ratio, it's over 1. That means it can actually accelerate vertically, something its Russian counterparts struggle with.
Wow, that's a game changer, especially in a dogfight situation. So we've established it's fast, it's agile, but what about the future? Aerospace and the Eurofighter website both hint at what's next.
And that's where things get really exciting. The Eurofighter isn't just about winning today's battles. It's designed with an eye on the future. On their website, they have a whole section on future battle space drivers.
Right. They lay out these big challenges like the rapidly changing nature of threats and the need for different military platforms to be connected.
It's a lot to consider, for sure. And they're not just building a jet, they're building a whole system that can adapt as the battlefield evolves, and that's where those cutting-edge technologies come in.
Let's dive into those a bit. The Eurofighter website highlights sensor fusion as a key game changer.
Think about it. It's like having eyes everywhere without actually having eyes everywhere. Data from multiple sensors is merged, giving the pilot a complete 360-degree view of what's happening.
But wouldn't all that information be overwhelming for the pilot?
That's the clever part. The system actually filters and prioritizes all that data, preventing information overload and helping the pilot focus on the most critical information.
So it's not just about seeing more, it's about seeing smarter. That makes sense.
Exactly. And that leads us to another crucial aspect, which the Eurofighter website calls interoperability and connectivity. It's all about how the Eurofighter can seamlessly share information with other platforms, other aircraft, ground units, even command centers.
Like a military Internet of Things. But wouldn't all that connectivity make it vulnerable to cyber attacks?
That's a real concern and definitely something defense planners are very aware of. Cybersecurity is a constantly evolving challenge, especially with a system as complex as the Eurofighter. They need robust defenses to keep up.
It definitely adds a whole other layer of complexity to warfare. And the Eurofighter website also talks about data management as being a crucial future tech.
Imagine having a mini command center right there in the cockpit. Instead of waiting for data analysis from the ground, the Eurofighter can process and update mission data in flight, so the pilot can adapt in real time.
Wow. What kind of advantage would that give the Eurofighter in a combat scenario?
Well, think about being able to retarget a missile based on the latest intel, or adjust your attack strategy based on real-time enemy movements. It's a whole new way of thinking about air warfare.
So we've covered a lot of the Eurofighter's origins, its swing roll capabilities, and all these incredible future technologies.
It really pushes the boundaries of what's possible in air combat.
Absolutely. And, you know, Aerospace makes a great point. The Eurofighter isn't just about pushing boundaries, it's about rising to the challenges of a security landscape that's constantly changing.
It's a testament to the power of collaboration and a symbol of how Europe is stepping up to meet those modern security challenges head-on.
Absolutely. And speaking of stepping up, I think it's time for us to step away for a quick break. We'll be right back to dive deeper into the Eurofighter Typhoon.
And, all the stuff we've been talking about with the Eurofighter, the sensor fusion, the connectivity, the data management, it all comes back to survivability on the battlefield.
Right, because it's great to have all the bells and whistles, but what good is it if the jet can't, survive a fight?
Exactly, and that's something that Aerospace really hits on. They talk about how the modern battle space is just getting more and more dangerous, more sophisticated threats all the time. So the Eurofighter needs to be able to not just withstand those threats, but overcome them.
So it's not just about looking good, it's got to be tough too.
Exactly. And that's where that whole situational awareness from all that technology comes in, being able to see what's happening, anticipate threats, react fast. Those are the things that'll keep a fighter jet in the air in the future.
It's like giving the pilot a sixth sense almost, like a way to see the invisible and stay ahead of the danger. But with all this emphasis on technology, what happens to the pilot? Does the pilot just become a passenger?
That's a good question. And, it's something Aerospace touches on, too. They talk about the human in the loop, even with all the automation and AI that's going into these modern fighter jets.
So the pilot's not just along for the ride, they're still vital?
Absolutely. The Eurofighter's designed to help the pilot, not replace them. The pilot is still the one making those big calls, using their experience and judgment to make sense of the data and decide what to do.
But wouldn't a computer be faster at those split-second life or death decisions? I mean, computers don't get scared or make mistakes when things get hairy.
Yeah, that's a pretty common misconception. Computers can process information faster, sure, but they don't have that intuition, that creativity, that adaptability that a human pilot has. Especially when things get unpredictable, a human can think outside the box in a way that's really valuable.
So it's a partnership then, tech and human skill working together.
Exactly. And it brings up another point that Aerospace makes about the future of the Eurofighter. With all this technology evolving so fast, at what point do these manned fighter jets become, obsolete?
That's a good point. We're seeing more and more drones and unmanned systems in warfare. Could they eventually just take over completely?
It's possible. But it's not so straightforward. Aerospace argues that human pilots bring some unique advantages to the table that might be tough to replicate with machines.
Like what specifically?
Well, think about the ability to adapt to unexpected situations, make those quick decisions with incomplete information, and just use good judgment in those messy situations. That's still really a human domain.
It's a fascinating debate and probably one that's not going away anytime soon. But for now, maybe let's get back to some of the specific technologies that the Eurofighter website dives into. They mentioned directed energy weapons, which sounds pretty futuristic.
Yeah, it's all about using highly focused energy like lasers or microwaves to knock out targets.
Hold on, like Star Wars stuff, is that even real?
It's not sci-fi anymore, it's becoming a reality. And the Eurofighter is being built with the possibility of adding those types of weapons in the future.
So what makes those so special? What advantages would those weapons bring?
Well, for one, they're incredibly precise. You can target and take out specific parts of an enemy aircraft or a missile without causing all that extra collateral damage. And they're fast. We're talking speed of light, so you don't have to worry about bullet drop or travel time.
That's pretty game-changing. But are there challenges in making something like that actually work?
Oh, absolutely. Getting those directed energy weapons powerful enough, compact enough, and reliable enough to actually use on a fighter jet, it's a huge engineering challenge. But the potential benefits are just so big that a lot of countries are really investing in it.
Makes sense. And the Eurofighter website also talks about these advanced electronic warfare systems. What's that all about?
Basically, using electronic signals to mess with enemy sensors and weapon systems. It's like a high-tech game of hide-and-seek, trying to make the Eurofighter invisible to enemy radar or tricking their missiles into targeting the wrong thing.
So you're giving the Eurofighter a cloak of invisibility or making it look like it's somewhere else entirely. That sounds incredibly effective, especially in a really crowded battle space.
Exactly. And the Eurofighter already has some pretty sophisticated electronic warfare systems, but they're being constantly upgraded to counter new threats.
It's like a constant arms race in technology, always trying to stay one step ahead.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, the Eurofighter website also mentions more sophisticated data links. What's the deal with those?
Remember we talked about that interoperability and connectivity earlier? Well, those data links are what make that all possible. They let the Eurofighter share all sorts of information with other aircraft, ground units, command centers. It's like a whole network of information across the battlefield, all in real time.
It's like a military internet, with information flowing everywhere instantly. That sounds incredibly powerful, but does it also mean there's potential for information overload?
Oh, for sure. With all that data coming in, figuring out how to make sure the right information gets to the right people at the right time, that's a huge challenge.
Just how do they manage that?
Well, they're using some really complex algorithms and filters to manage the flow of information. And AI is playing a bigger and bigger role, too.
AI. How so?
AI systems can analyze tons of data in real time, finding patterns, picking out weird things, and flagging potential threats.
So it's like a digital co-pilot, keeping an eye on everything and letting the human pilot know when something needs attention.
That's a good way to put it. And as AI gets even better, we'll probably see it do even more in air warfare.
We've gone from lasers and invisibility cloaks to AI co-pilots. The future of air combat sounds crazy complex and technologically advanced. But where does the human factor fit into all of this? Will there even be pilots in this high-tech future?
It's a good question, and one Aerospace brings up too. They talk about how we're relying more and more on technology, but human judgment and decision-making are still essential.
It does seem like a paradox. We're creating these super sophisticated machines, but also realizing there are things humans can do that machines just can't yet.
Exactly. Which brings us back to that human-in-the-loop concept. Even with all the AI and automation, some decisions are best left to humans.
Decisions that need intuition, creativity, maybe even a bit of gut feeling, those are things that are still very human.
Exactly. And those qualities might become even more important as the battle space gets more complex and unpredictable.
So, the more technology we have, the more important the human element becomes. That's an interesting dynamic. But how does the Eurofighter fit into all of this? Where does it strike that balance between advanced technology and human control?
That's something the designers have really thought about. And their answer seems to be human-machine teaming.
Human-machine teaming. What does that mean exactly?
Basically, they're designing systems where humans and machines work together, each using their strengths to achieve the goal.
So not replacing humans with machines, but finding ways for them to work better together.
Right. And that's reflected in the Eurofighter's cockpit. It's designed to give the pilot the information they need to make smart decisions, while also giving them the tools to control all those complex systems.
It sounds like a tricky balance to get right, but super important as warfare gets more complex. And, Aerospace brings up another good point about the future of the Eurofighter, and that's affordability.
Oh yeah, good point. As all this tech gets more advanced, the costs to develop and maintain these fighter jets are only going to skyrocket.
It's one thing to build a better mousetrap. It's another to build one that people can actually afford.
Exactly. And that's something the Eurofighter folks are aware of. They're trying to find ways to cut costs without compromising capability.
Not an easy task.
Not at all. And it shows that the future of air power isn't just about technology, it's about economics and politics too. The Eurofighter is a product of international cooperation, and its future depends on those countries working together and committing to it.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even the most advanced fighter jet is tied to all these bigger things. Diplomacy, global relationships, all that. But let's bring it back to our listener for a second. What does this mean for the average person who maybe isn't a military expert or a diplomat?
Good question. I think the takeaway here is that the world's changing quickly, and technology, especially in warfare, is evolving at an incredible speed. Aerospace really emphasizes that.
So we can't afford to ignore what's happening elsewhere, because it will affect us eventually.
Right, and on top of that, technology is changing the way we fight wars. The Eurofighter is just one example of how AI, data, robotics, all those things are changing the battlefield.
So even if you're not into fighter jets, all this technological stuff will touch your life in some way eventually.
Definitely. And lastly, Aerospace sort of hints at this idea that even the most advanced tech is just a tool. How we use it and what for, that's up to us.
So it's not just about the tech itself. It's about our values, our ethics, our strategy, and how those things guide how the tech is used.
Exactly. And those are the discussions we all need to be having. We should be asking those tough questions about what technology's role is in our lives, what kind of future we want, and what responsibilities come with having this powerful tech.
It's a lot to consider. But sometimes the best questions are the ones without easy answers, right?
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Agreed. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought. Aerospace kept coming back to this idea of human obsolescence in the face of all this crazy technology.
Yeah, that was a big theme, that tension between what humans create and our own place in that future.
Exactly. So here's a question for everyone listening. With all of this technology changing so fast, Will there be a day when fighter pilots, like the ones flying the Eurofighter, won't be needed anymore? Or will there always be a need for human intuition and judgment and courage in the cockpit, even in a world where machines are doing more and more?
That's a fantastic question to leave everyone with something to think about as we all navigate this rapidly changing world.
Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep. That's what it means to be human, after all.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the Eurofighter Typhoon. We hope you've enjoyed the ride. So we've gone deep into the Eurofighter, everything from its design to all those future technologies. But like Aerospace keeps reminding us, it comes down to how all this impacts the world, even if we're not in the cockpit.
Right, it's bigger than just the jet itself.
Exactly. So how do we connect something like the Eurofighter back to the bigger picture?
Well, I think it's about understanding the context. The Eurofighter isn't just some cool piece of tech. It actually reflects a lot about the geopolitical realities we're all living in.
Okay, help me out here. What does a fighter jet have to do with geopolitics?
Think about it. The Eurofighter, it came from European cooperation, right? So it represents a commitment to collective defense. These countries recognize that in today's world, those security challenges, they often go beyond just one nation's borders.
So it's like a symbol of European unity, a sign that they're ready to work together and defend their interests as a team.
Exactly. And that sends a pretty powerful message, not just to potential adversaries, but to allies too.
But couldn't that message be misinterpreted? I mean, some might see it as a show of force, more aggressive than defensive.
That's a good point, and it really highlights how tricky it can be for countries to manage military power. It's about showing strength, but not being too aggressive, deterring threats without making things worse.
It's a tough balance to strike. But let's bring it back to our listeners for a moment.
Yeah.
What can someone who's not, say, a military expert or politician take away from all of this? What are the big things to remember?
I think Aerospace lays out a few important things. First, the world's getting more and more interconnected every day. What happens in one place can impact the whole world.
So we can't just ignore what's going on in other parts of the world because it could come back to bite us.
Exactly. Second, technology. It's changing how we fight wars, and it's happening faster than ever. The Eurofighter, it's just one example of how AI, data, robotics, all that is changing the game on the battlefield.
So even if someone's not interested in fighter jets specifically, this tech stuff, it's going to affect their lives one way or another.
For sure. And lastly, Aerospace kind of brings up this idea that even the most advanced tech is just a tool at the end of the day. It's how we use it that really matters.
Right, so it comes down to our values, our ethics, how we think strategically. All of that is just as important as the tech itself.
Exactly. And those are the kinds of conversations we all need to be having. We should be asking those hard questions. What's the role of technology? What kind of future do we want? And what responsibilities come with all this powerful tech?
Those are big questions.
They are, but sometimes the most important questions don't have simple answers, right?
So true. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the Eurofighter Typhoon. We hope you learned something new and had fun along the way. Thanks for joining us.